Hey everyone, welcome back aboard the Aqua-Cultured channel. My name is Ashley Ringelspaw, also known as Captain Butch. This boat right here is a 1989 44-foot DeFever offshore cruiser that I've owned now for about 6 years. I've had the opportunity to go through the majority of the vessel and find out what I do and do not like about it, and I've made a lot of changes and enhancements to the boat, which I'm going to go over in this episode. And if you haven't done so already, go back and check out the tour that I made a few years back when I first bought the boat so you can see what the changes have been that I've made over the last 6 years. I hope this video will be helpful to prospective and existing boat owners by showing you what to expect when acquiring a boat of this size, type, and age, and what you may need to fix and replace, as well as the things you can do to make the vessel more reliable, safe, aesthetically pleasing, comfortable, and overall more enjoyable. And of course we want to know how much it all costs, right? Well, stay to the end and find out what the damage is. I figured in order to give this tour the amount of time and detail that it deserves, I'm breaking it up into 3 parts, where we're going to start out with the interior tour, and then in parts 2 and 3 we will do the exterior and then engine room, which will include mechanical, plumbing, and electrical. And we finally made it to part 3 of this 3-part series. So let's get down into the engine room and see what makes this boat run, talk about what makes it unique and special, see all of the repairs and upgrades that I've made, and of course we'll discuss what I love and hate about the boat. And then we're going to walk around to various parts to see the hidey-holes to access important equipment to make your life a little easier down the road.
Alright guys, so why don't we wrap up this 3-part series and see the engine room, talk about the mechanical, electrical, plumbing. We've already talked about the exterior of the boat, the interior of the boat, what I've liked about it, what I don't like about it, what I've spent on the boat, what I've done to it, and now we're going to get into the nuts and bolts. And if you've been following along and notice there's a little bit of a pause between the last video and this video, it's because I was working on other projects on the boat, like repainting my non-skid decks, stripping and varnishing, revarnishing the entire handrail around the whole boat, stripping and repainting the window frames around the cabin. So I've been busy, but unfortunately I didn't hit the record button for the YouTube channel on those projects. So if you don't want to miss those little nuggets, make sure you follow me on Instagram. It is Aqua_Cultured. So Aqua_Cultured. Don't forget the D on the end. That is on Instagram. Make sure you follow me there. I post all the time. I'm always out on the water doing things, working on the boat, adventuring, so you definitely want to follow along there because I'm not going to catch everything and be able to put it onto YouTube for you, unfortunately. Hopefully I'll get better at that. Alright, so let's go on down to the engine room, shall we? So we have to go down these nice steep steps down into the forward stateroom to get down into the engine room. Once you turn the corner, there's the access door, which is docked down here and has a nice little viewing window so you can peek in there when you're underway and make sure there's no fire, smoke, or water spraying around and without having to go inside. And you can close it there if you want to block out the light if you have the lights on in the engine room. And we're going to pop that door open and come on inside. Alright, so the first thing you're going to notice is how large this engine room is. This is about the biggest engine room you're going to get on this size vessel, which is a 44-foot boat with about a 15-foot beam. The engine room is almost stand-up unless you are a shorter person, and it can be completely stand-up. I'm about 5'11", so I've got to crouch down a little bit. The inside portion of the engine room, the interior portion, dips down a little bit, so you get a little bit more space here, and then it flares upwards and you lose the headroom a little bit as you move outbound. But still, great amount of space. I always keep a bucket down here so I can sit down and relieve my knees and my muscles and stuff when I'm down here for a long period of time. But it is a great space. And you can see right off the bat we've got a couple of beautiful red Ford Lehman 135 horsepower naturally aspirated diesels. We've got 2 of them, of course, in here. These puppies have about 5,500 hours on them right now, and they still run fantastically. They start right up. They could be sitting for 2 months and you hit that start button, they pop right on. They don't smoke, they run smooth. And it's just important to maintain them well, give them good fuel, change that oil, make sure you stay up on your raw water pump impeller, your belts, your heat exchangers, and all that good stuff. They've been fantastic engines. This boat tops out at about 9 knots, give or take, with current, wind, and waves and whatnot. But typically I cruise this boat between 1600 and 1800 RPM, and usually that will get me somewhere between 6.5 and 7.5 knots, and that's a pretty happy cruise. And these engines at that RPM will burn somewhere around 2 gallons per hour, so they're pretty darn efficient. I have replaced the freshwater circulation pumps on both of the engines. I replaced the mixing elbow on my Starboard Engine. I of course replaced all of my belts. I've replaced every heat exchanger on the engine, and my engines have 4 heat exchangers a piece. One is the main heat exchanger, then we've got an oil heat exchanger, and then we have back here the transmission cooler, and then this is for my active fin stabilizers. And I was able to purchase all of those from American Diesel, which if any of you have Ford Lehman diesel engines, or you're planning to have a boat that has Ford Lehman diesel engines, American Diesel, fantastic place to contact to get all the parts that you need for these bad boys. And I'll leave a link to American Diesel below so that it's easily accessible for you and you can check out what they have. But I definitely recommend, when you get a boat with these Ford Lehmans, to just go ahead, well, unless the previous owner has said that they replaced the coolers and heat exchangers recently, just go ahead and replace them. They're not that big of a deal. It's a good thing to get out of the way. I want to say the main engine heat exchangers were somewhere around $500 or $600 a piece, and then the rest of the coolers were anywhere between $80 and $120 a piece. So it's a good investment right up front. Just get those out of the way so that you don't get surprised down the road when one fails and you end up overheating a component on your engine. So just get that done. And then of course we've got our raw water pump on the engine. It's inboard on this port side, outboard on the starboard side. Of course those impellers have been changed out multiple times. I haven't changed out the pumps just yet, so I haven't had any leaks develop in the shaft or anything like that that necessitated that to happen. I'm planning on changing out these secondary fuel filters for just a single fuel filter. That's a little bit easier to change out, and it's not so finicky, and it would just be a single unit. So that's on the list of things to do. And when I bought the boat, it already had newer transmissions. These are twin disc transmissions that the previous owners put on here. The boat came equipped with Borg-Warner, and they changed those out. Also, they've changed out the fuel lift pumps on the engine, and you have that. It's right back in here on this port side engine. That's on the inboard side. That's where your fuel lift pump is, and that's where you can manually bleed your engines. Otherwise, my boat is equipped with electronic fuel pumps, so if I change my fuel filter, or for whatever reason I run out of fuel or I need to bleed my engines, I can use these electronic fuel pumps to purge the air out of the engines. If you look at the front of the engine, you'll notice a hydraulic pump connected to a belt-driven pulley. Those are powering my active fin stabilizers, which there's one on either side of the boat. These are Wilcox Sea Brace stabilizers. They are discontinued. Most of you know about Naiads and ABT tracks, but these Wilcox Sea Brace stabilizers do a great job. They take the roll right out of the movement of the boat, and they're easy to maintain. You can get parts for these from like auto parts stores. Like you have a window wiper motor there and a power steering pump. So they're all basic components. You don't need to get a specialist in to work on these. They are out of service right now just because my gyro mechanism that sends the signal to the fins is offline right now. I need to get it serviced.
and I have a little bit of salt creep coming in through the seals, so I need to replace the seals on the stabilizer. So in the meantime, I have them locked in a centered position with pins, so that way I can still operate the boat without worrying about the fins flopping around uncontrollably and not working properly. All right, so moving aft, we're gonna go to our third engine here, which is my diesel generator. It's a 12.5 kilowatt Westerbeek generator, and man, this thing has run me through the ringer. I've done a lot of work to this sucker, and I'm going to put together a video just for this generator coming up soon. That's going to talk all about the trials and tribulations I've experienced with it. It has about 3,500 hours on it, and I have definitely experienced a lot of blood, sweat, tears, and a lot of curse words with this engine. But it is running right now. It's functioning great, so gotten past all that. So you'll definitely want to check that video out to see everything that I've gone through on it, and I will talk about if I would recommend when you get an old boat with an old diesel generator, if it starts having problems, if you just go ahead and replace it or fix it. So stay tuned for that video to find out. All right, so next up is the sea chest. So these DeFever 44s all come with these handy dandy sea chests that are molded into the hull of the boat. So what this sea chest does is gives you all of your below the waterline raw water penetrations all in one location. So you're not chasing them down around the boat. They're all here in one location. This right here is my air conditioning raw water feed. Back there is for my main engine raw water. Right here is my generator. Right over there is my washdown for up on deck. These two here on either side of the air conditioner seacock are those were for my previous heads on the boat. The boat came with raw water fed toilets, which I got rid of and switched those over to freshwater, so that's why those are capped off now. So you can get a top-down view here of the sea chest. You can see how it just comes straight up out of the hole there, and if you look down in through this acrylic lid, you can see down through the bottom of the boat there's a big grate down there that's where all of the water comes in. And you can take this acrylic lid off when you are in the water. However, the water level is pretty high in the sea chest. This thing is about, the bottom of the sea chest is about 30 to 34 inches below the water line. And the water level comes up pretty high in it. So if you're going to take this acrylic lid off to service the inside of your sea chest, you want to do so in a calm location. And it's also helpful if you drain your starboard side water tank so that you list to the opposite side and lift this further out of the water. Because I have accessed this while in the water multiple times in a nice calm protected marina, and even the slightest little wave coming through will cause water to splash out of the top of the sea chest. But it can be done, you just have to be careful about it. On the other side of the sea chest you have, you have this valve at the top of the sea chest, and that is the vent, the air vent. So as water fills the sea chest, it's got to displace the air, and that's where the air goes. And boy, if I knew now, if I knew then what I knew, if I knew then what I know now, when I was cruising down to the Keys, I lost this starboard engine because it lost its raw water supply. And that is because, unbeknownst to me, that air vent became clogged up with calcium carbonate and salt crystals and all that crap, and it pushed the water level down in the sea chest, and the starboard side raw water intake is a little higher than the port side. It sucked air, and I was stupid and didn't realize it and spent hours down here in 4 to 6 foot seas, overheated engine, it's hot, and I never got it fixed until I got back to the dock. But if I knew then what I know now, I could have had it fixed in like 5 minutes. So if you ever get one of these, make sure that air vent stays nice and clear, and service it from time to time. And a neat little feature with these Groco sea strainers for my main engines is you can see these little adapters here on each side, little plugs. Those are actually emergency bilge pumps, essentially. So they turn your engines into bilge pumps. So if you have water ingress that is overwhelming your boat and your bilge pumps are having a problem keeping up, you can pull those plugs and your engines will actually pump the water out of the boat while the engines are running and propelling you forward. Right, and so I mentioned my sea strainer for my air conditioner, which my air conditioning pump is right down here. And I have 3 air conditioners on this boat. One of them is a self-contained, which is up in the salon, and then the other 2 are split systems, which are down here. This is the forward cabin compressor and the aft cabin compressor. And those, my friends, are original air conditioners from 1989. Those are Lunaire. And man, they don't build them like they used to. Those things are still trucking along. The only thing that I've had to deal with, which I've had to deal with quite a few times, is they've developed refrigerant leaks in their copper tubing, and they needed to be brazed, which is kind of like a soldering technique to block up those little pinholes. So now let's talk about tankage. So my water tanks are down here, and 2 of my 3 fuel tanks are down in the engine room. So on either side of the engines, you can see with the help of the lettering there to let me know what side is starboard and which side is port when I'm down below. Those are my water tanks, and they are around 175 gallons a piece, about 180 gallons, I think. So I have a total capacity of about 360 gallons of water. And I have these sight gauges here with a valve on each side so that I can keep tabs on my water level. And I'll usually get a couple of weeks of regular use out of a full tank of water. And then back in the corners, the aft corners of the engine room, are my 2 main fuel tanks, and those hold around 350 gallons of fuel. And then there's a 3rd tank underneath my bed that holds about 250 gallons of fuel. So you get somewhere around 950 gallons of total fuel capacity on board. And again, there are the sight gauges with valves on either side so that you can, I don't know if you can see that, here they are. So that you can see your fuel level. And we have our fuel manifold, so I can select which engine is pulling fuel from which tank and where it's returning fuel to, because the engines are not going to burn all of the fuel that's being delivered to the engine. It's only going to burn a portion of it, and then it's going to send the rest back to the fuel tank. So you can pick which fuel tank it goes back to. And then behind me is my house water filter with a little accumulator tank. And then the water pump is right there, so that delivers water throughout the entire boat. You can't turn multiple faucets on at the same time. You can only do one at a time without losing pressure, but it's just fine. And then if you notice this little compartment down here, that is for my aft shower and sink. So that gray water goes into that little basin, and the bilge pump automatically pumps that overboard. And it also acts as a backup bilge pump system. Otherwise, the main bilge pump is up here forward, down in that little pocket there. And if you're out extended cruising and you don't have access to fresh water all the time, you can use your water maker here. So here's my gigantic water pump, membrane, control, and I have not used that once. And then of course we have our water heater here, which can be either heated traditionally with electricity, or it's actually hooked up to my port side engine. So when I'm running the engine, it will heat the water, and that does create some nice hot water. So if you've been running for a while, just be ready when you turn that hot water on at the faucet. You might get burned, it's hot. And we are looking forward in the engine room. So you can see how voluminous this is in here. You've got my tool chest there, the toolbox on top, vise on top of the bench there, so it's kind of like a little workshop. And the lighting in here, I have 110 volt fluorescent lighting, and then I have 12 volt LED lighting in here as well. So we can run off of AC or DC and still see in here. And outbound of each engine, we have these battery boxes here. I have 12 AGM 975 amp hour batteries for the house system, which also are used for the cranking of the engines as well. And then I've got a standalone 12 volt battery in this box here that's just dedicated for the generator. The boat came equipped with flooded lead acid batteries, which were on their last leg, and I just upgraded to the AGM, which I've been really happy with. I get a lot more capacity out of them and run time. I didn't go to the lithium ion like a lot of other people have, but that is mainly because of money. I didn't have the coin at the time to upgrade to that system, so AGM was just the logical next better step than what I had before, and I'm happy with it. So one gripe about the battery boxes being outbound of the engines is it limits my access to the outbound side of the engine. So you can see down here, especially on this starboard engine, I have critical components down here like heat exchangers and fuel pumps and raw water pump. So it can make it a big pain in the butt to access that side. And when I was changing out those heat exchangers, which going back to why I recommend doing that is because when I was changing out one of the main heat exchangers, when I pulled that heat exchanger off, it showed me that I was close to failure on one or two of my oil lines down there, but you couldn't see that otherwise unless you removed that heat exchanger. So it was great to discover that before there was catastrophe. So then I have a fire suppression system, an automatic fire suppression system up in the forward bulkhead of the engine room. This is a Fireboy Halon 1301 system that is automatically discharged if the temperature goes above 165 degrees down here, but it is only activated when the engines are running. And there's different ways you can set these up where you can manually deploy them or have them done automatically. You can have them shut louvers off in the engine compartment, shut your engines down, whatever, so it stays airtight in here and puts out your fire and doesn't let it reignite again. Down here in the forward stateroom, we have a couple of hanging lockers, and in one of them we have the access to my inverter charger, which is a Magnum Magnesine unit with the controller here just next to it. This is actually a couple of breakers for the toilets, my Tecma toilets, which I showed you in an earlier video. And then we've got the heart interface monitor here, so this will tell you the battery voltages in both of the banks and discharge rates and how many amp hours I have left. All right, I'm in the forward head, and behind this medicine cabinet is the access to the gyro for the stabilizers, the control connection, and also you can get to other components for your steering and whatnot from this access, which is nice and handy. All right, so I've got the medicine cabinet removed so we can gain access to all of this equipment back here. So we've got the electrical connections for the stabilizers, and then that is the gyro, and that is actually a piece of avionics instrumentation. I think it's called a turn coordinator. So what that does is it senses the roll of the boat, and it will send a signal to the computer that then sends a signal down to the stabilizer fins to activate either the port or starboard fin to turn whichever direction it needs to turn to counteract the roll of the boat. So that gyro, I believe, is having issues because my stabilizer fins were just going all over the place in an uncontrollable way, and I've troubleshot everything else, and I've narrowed it down to that. So I need to take it to an avionics shop to see if I can either repair it, or if I need to replace it, I'll just get a new replacement. Okay, let's talk Blackwater, which Blackwater
water is the wastewater from your toilet. So you have to hold that on board and either pump it out into the municipal waste management system. Here at the marina that I'm at, there's a pump out boat that comes to us and pumps us out once a week. There's also a dock you can go to and pump out there. Or if you go offshore a certain distance, you can pump straight into the water. But on this boat, the black water holding tanks are down in this forward stateroom access hatch. And so now we have access to our black water holding tanks, which there are two tanks. You have this polyethylene tank here, and then there is an original fiberglass tank forward, and they are connected to one another. I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's a hose that connects the two together, and then there's an air vent here and an air vent there. And so the total capacity is about 30 or 35 gallons, which isn't that much for a boat of this size. That will get you about a week of regular use with 1 or 2 people on board, and then you have to pump out. So, you know, given this boat is called an offshore cruiser, so it was built for offshore cruising. So they put a lot of capacity into the freshwater tanks and the fuel tanks to give you a lot of service when you're not at the dock at a marina. But the holding tank, blackwater tankage, is small because they assume you're going to be out cruising all the time. You can just pump out pretty much whenever you want because you're out offshore. So it's not that big of a deal. But when you are in a marina or in a protected habitat area, it kind of sucks to have that little amount of holding tank space. And then this little basin right here, which looks just like the one I showed you in the engine room, that is the catch basin for the shower, the useless shower up here in the forward head. So really that is more useful as an emergency bilge pump. So if the water level gets up that high, that will kick into gear and help with dewatering your boat. And then there is a main bilge pump. You can see the Rule bilge pump right there. That is one of the main bilge pumps for the forward compartment. So one other really annoying thing about this boat is the high water alarm switch. It's just the standard bilge pump switch is mounted underneath that black water tank all the way back. So you cannot access the switch to test it regularly unless you remove that holding tank, which is ridiculous. You're not going to do that. So the only way to really test that switch is by taking a hose, filling this forward compartment up enough to get that switch to activate. So that is on my list to put the switch a little bit further forward where it's more accessible, because that's just stupid. I do have a switch in the aft of the boat for high water alarm, which I'll show you, which is much more accessible. Okay, we are now in the aft stateroom, and just going to show you a couple of things real quick as far as access to some plumbing. So this light cover here above the vanity sink here, you remove that in order to access the plumbing for your sink up in the galley, which is decent access. And then again, with this medicine cabinet, you can remove that medicine cabinet and get access to the drains for your galley sink and your aft deck sink, and then also your shower water connections. Back behind the toilet here, there is overboard discharges for bilge pumps, sink and shower drains, toilet discharge, but that's been disconnected. And so to get access to that, you pull this, I've got it disconnected, you pull the toilet forward a little bit, and then you've got this little hatch here, and you've got a discharge there, you've got a discharge there, and then you can get back into this little cabinet to get to the other discharges. So get to know where all of those penetrations are through the side of your boat. So if you have a leak or anything like that, ingress of water into the boat, you know where to go to find it. And then access to your aft build pump is down underneath these stairs here, or I should say down underneath this ladder. There is an access panel down there, and that is where also my high water bilge alarm is. Okay, I pulled the ladder out of the way. Now we have access to this hatch down here. So it's a little dusty. I need to do some dusting down here. So you have access to your third main bilge pump, which is aft. You can see the switch down there maybe.
here is my high water alarm switch. So that stuff is nice and accessible, which is great. All right, so the third fuel tank is underneath my bed. That is a 250-gallon tank, and since I bought the boat, it's been empty. The previous owner said that they never filled it up, and the owners before them said they never really needed that much capacity, and so they just never filled it back up when it went empty, and I was a little suspect. I know that there at one time was some water ingress from the through bolts for the swim platform, and then also the rudder stuffing boxes. So I suspected that the seawater seepage created a little pinhole in the fuel tank and leaked, and then they drained the tank out and then just never fixed it and refilled it. But I have not tested it. I need to pressure test it. It's on the list. So it's been empty for the last 6 years. Or do I just rip the tank out and put a smaller fuel tank in, maybe put in more freshwater holding capacity or even blackwater holding capacity, even though that's kind of gross to be sleeping over a waste tank, but hey, you're sleeping over fuel too, so I mean, it's not a huge difference in concern there. Or do I just use it for storage, or a combination of any of what I just mentioned? So let me know down in the comments below what you would do in this situation. Would you fix the tank? Would you rip it out and just use it for storage, more holding tank capacity, water capacity, just storage alone? I'm open to ideas. I haven't made up my mind, so let me know what you would do, and you might have a better idea than me. In order to access this tank, you have to pull the mattress back off of the platform. I closed the door to the head to give me more space. Maybe one day I'll do kind of a a gas strut assisted platform to lift up the bed to make it easier to access. But for now, I gotta pull this thing back, and then you have access panels kind of all over the place on this platform. Okay, so we got the bed pulled back. You can see the access panel that I pulled back there, which you can get to your steering and your rudder posts. And then back behind here is your uniflow valve for your steering, which is powered by ATF, automatic transmission fluid. I do have a leak on my Capilano ram there, which I need to replace the O-rings on, which is on the list. And then you can see the fuel tank here, which you can hear is empty. There's the fuel fill there. And you can see the rudder post stuffing box back there, which I had taken apart and refurbished while I was in the yard a couple of years ago. Those things were really corroded, and I don't think the stuffing had ever been changed in those glands, so they were seeping a bit, and it just looked terrible. And they're in much better condition now. They look beautiful and are functioning great. And as mentioned in a previous video, this boat has a single 50 amp shore power connection for shore power. You can see the cord is right outside this window here. I don't know if you can see that or not. And then back behind this little drawer is where the power comes into the boat. And I don't know if you can see in there, there's a galvanic isolator that's mounted in there, which came with the boat, which is a nice little thing to have. And down here is my main breaker panel. This is actually where I can control the generator from. I can either start and stop the generator from down on the generator, or I have the control here. But what I don't have up here for my generator is a control panel so that I can see the temperature, oil pressure, and all that good stuff. So to see that, I have to go down into the engine room and all the way back to the generator to see it, which is not a terrible thing, because then it gets your eyes down into the engine room, make sure there's nothing else going on. But it would be nice to have that up here with a remote panel, which I might do at some point, but we'll see. So you have your battery selector switch here. Here's all of your meters for voltage and amperage from the batteries and shore power connection or generator. This is where you turn your power from shore power to generator. And then we've got manual bilge pump controls here, and then of course the various breakers for your AC and DC things throughout the boat. You can see the engine room access through the cabin sole here. I lifted up one of the access hatches to give you a gander. It's a long ways down there, so you don't want to fall. There's my sea chest, give you a nice little view. You can see right down through the bottom of the boat. And there's one of the beautiful reds. Thanks so much for hanging with me for this 3-part series and being patient, waiting for this 3rd video to come out. Leave a comment below if you have any other questions. If you want to learn more about anything in more detail, I'll address it down there or in future videos. And of course, like, subscribe, hit that bell so you know when I'm posting more videos. Follow me on Instagram, Aqua_Cultured on Instagram. I'm looking forward to putting more of these videos out for you, so hang in there and you have yourself a great day, week, weekend, whatever you're doing. And remember, if you're not floating, you're sinking, so stay afloat, my friends. Generator been a pain in my ass.